Former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro joins us to give us the inside scoop on John Kelly, the election, and a possible second Trump administration. Capitol Police may have been set up to fail on January 6th, and a last-minute court ruling will allow mail-in ballots to be counted after Election Day in a swing state. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, October 29th. Was there a traitor in the Trump administration? In a recent piece for Blaze News, Peter Navarro, who's the former director of the White House National Trade Council, argued that John Kelly, who's Trump's former chief of staff, was, quote, a bullying coward. So here to discuss with me is Blaze editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson and Peter Navarro himself. So Peter, let's get right into it. So why was Kelly a traitor within the Trump administration?
He was a coward, bully, and a traitor. He was a four-star general who refused to obey repeatedly the commander-in-chief of this country that was duly elected by the American people. It seems to me in the military, the first rule is obey the chain of command. Now, nobody knows Kelly better than I. I served with him for over 500 days, and it was painful because he was a bully, but he also would interfere with key aspects of the Trump agenda. And I'll be very specific about this. A lot of the things that Trump wanted to do on the trade agenda involved things like setting tariffs on steel and aluminum or on China. We did buy American, hire American orders. And I would see repeatedly in the Oval Office, we'd be in there with the trade team, Kelly would be in there, and at the end of the discussion, it would be, all right, Kelly, let's get this done, whatever it might have been. And it was supposed to be done the next day. And sometimes weeks would go by before the president would say, hey, where's my tariff or where's this? And Kelly would, and he'd bury stuff. And he'd do it because he was under the mistaken belief that he was the elected president, not President Trump. And I mean, it boggles the mind that a four-star general who knows the importance of the chain of command would do that. And that's, to me, if he were in the military and did that, he would be court-martialed. And the act is of treason when you betray your commander-in-chief. That's the case against John Kelly. And look, he never should have been put in as chief of staff. Look, in the military, I love folks in the military. They're willing to lay their life down. But he was a fish out of water in the White House. He walks in with these high IQ Wall Street guys and other people who are the sharpest people in the shed. And he was always the dumbest guy in the room. And he was terrible with the media. There was just nothing about him that had any appeal. He did tremendous damage. And the last thing he's done now, add bully, coward, traitor, election interferer. He's got no business talking that kind of smack and trash 2 weeks out before an election to a left-wing publication like The Atlantic.
Peter, I cannot tell you how much I appreciated reading this article. Your candor and honesty are very much appreciated here, and I think our readers, our entire audience appreciates what you said as well. Unlike you, I only saw him once in the White House, wander into a room towards the end and seemed like a very angry and confused person. But can you tell us a little bit about Kelly and what he represents? Because, you know, he's basically said this publicly. I mean, he thought he was saving the White House and the country from Trump. And everyone needs to understand that there were people like him, right? I mean, the reasoning that he had was, oh, well, I'm saving the country from the president while working for him.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the Blaze for publishing my article. He did a beautiful job production-wise. Kelly was of a type in the White House. There were the three generals, McMaster, there was Mattis over at the Pentagon, there was Kelly. They had this globalist view, for example, with respect to the trade agenda, that you couldn't, for example, go after South Korea to redo their trade deal, even though it was killing our auto industry, because they didn't want to disturb the military alliance. Now, what they didn't understand was a couple of things. One is that if we allow South Korea or Japan to destroy our automobile industry, when push comes to shove, we're not going to have the defense industrial base in order to defend ourselves and them. That's number one. And number two, they didn't understand the beauty of Trump. It's like we're playing with the strong bargaining hand. We could go to South Korea, and we did this successfully, and say, hey, that's a bad deal for us. We're renegotiating. He can hold their feet to the fire without endangering the alliances. And the idea that those three generals, or Gary Cohn at the National Economic Council, Wall Street Goldman Sachs guy, or Rex Tillerson, the Exxon guy at the Department of State, somehow thought that they knew better than Trump when Trump had been successfully elected on a MAGA platform on bringing our manufacturing back home, was just wrong. I mean, the original sin of all of this was to appoint any of those clowns to begin with. I'm sure that President Trump will get it right the second term, but I'm telling you, it was tough. Nobody would have bet on this. I won only three people that survived all 4 years, plus the campaign with Donald Trump. And I got more done in 4 years than Kamala Harris did. I'll put my record on that. But my point is simply that those first couple of years, man, that was hand-to-hand combat with people like Kelly. I mean, he tried to fire. I was there with him 510 days. He probably tried to fire me 509 of them because I never took any of his crap. The other thing, I didn't even get a chance to talk about this much, but he's like Captain Queeg, if you know that. He would eavesdrop on the president's conversations at night. The president loves to get on the phone at night. That's kind of his thing. He talks to whoever he needs to talk. That's how he formulates ideas and comes to the great conclusions he so often does. And Kelly was afraid that Trump would be talking to people and, oh my gosh, he shouldn't be talking, whatever. So he'd do that, and then he'd read the phone logs to see if people like me had made any calls to the president. And he'd try to enforce this rule on Trump where he tried to exclude people from him instead of, as Corey Lewandowski once said, letting Trump be Trump. And it was just doomed to failure. There's a poignant moment in my In Trump Time book where I write about the final days of Kelly. We're sitting in Buenos Aires, Argentina at the G20, and we're sitting at a dinner table across from the Chinese delegation. Trump's in the center, head-to-head with Xi Jinping, right? And Kelly's a broken man by that point, and he's like days away from leaving, and he turns to me and apologizes for what he did to me, and he said that he got it wrong, that he didn't realize I was one of the good guys, and the Gary Cohns of this world who had basically wrapped them around their fingers were the ones who were really the toxic ones. And if he had understood that from the beginning and cast his lot in with the Trump people instead of the interlopers like Gary Cohn and Mattis and Tillerson and those people, he would have done possibly a good job. If he had stayed at Homeland Security, he probably would have been a success. He just had no business at the White House, and he did tremendous damage. And now he's trying to stop Donald Trump from getting a second term, and that should piss everybody off.
Peter, before we get to this election this time around, the 2020 election, we all know revolved around Hunter Biden and his laptop. And earlier today, a great reporter, Catherine Herridge, came out on X and said, of course, the feds knew what was happening. The IRS, the DOJ, and the FBI all knew that Hunter Biden's laptop was real immediately. And they said that prosecutors demanded that they not ask questions about Joe Biden ahead of the 2020 election. So what's your take? Does any of this surprise you at all?
No, look, the FBI put me in leg irons, took me down at an airport for a misdemeanor where the protocol is, hey, Navarro, we got a warrant for you. Would you mind reporting down to the court? Okay. No, they are the Federal Bureau of Intimidation. They went after Trump with automatic rifles, me with handguns. It's like, that is a broken agency. That is an agency that needs to be dismantled and built from the ground back up. Look, we know that if the people of America had known what was in that laptop, they would have voted more for Donald Trump, and that alone would have been enough to sway the election. So what the FBI engaged in was election interference. And what amazes me, like the left, they call us, for example, fascists and authoritarians. Like, I went to prison, Bannon went to prison, Rudy Giuliani's bankrupt because of them, John Clark and John Eastman lost their bar cards because of them. They want to put Donald Trump in prison for 700 years. And don't forget, if Kamala wins, they'll do that. And it's just like, and then they say we interfere with elections, and they do this kind of stuff. I mean, that's egregious. I think what we don't need retribution. What we need is accountability. And the people who were involved at the FBI and the Russia hoax and in the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, and some of these legislators like Schiff and Swalwell, who repeatedly lied to the American public, and then the 20 or so intelligence, let's put that in air quotes, intelligence officers who said that the laptop was a Russia hoax too. Now, come on. So good for Catherine Herridge, good reporting. But what we need to do now in the last 7 days, just get our people to the polls. Here's what I'm hearing out there. I just got back from a trip to North Carolina and Georgia. I was on a bus tour with some folks, and then I did 4 rallies with the presidents, had the opportunity to speak and listen. Here's what I heard. America's in trouble, deep trouble. Kamala Harris is responsible for most of that trouble. Donald Trump will get us out of that trouble. And that's the closing argument here. That's why I think that if we get our people to the polls, Donald Trump will be the 47th president. And time's on our less they like her. She's very unlikable.
That's true.
I mean, let me put a plug in for Newsmax's Blind Ambition documentary. It's one of the, I wish everybody in this country would watch that, because it goes back to the roots of Kamala Harris and all the Marxist roots with her father and all her woke ideology pronunciations back when she was working her way up the ladder. And she's just she's not America. She's not America. She's California, San Francisco. Yeah. And that is no longer America.
Well, Peter, don't go anywhere. We'll have more with Peter Navarro right after this. Everybody stay with us. Peter Navarro is still back with us, and we're 1 week away from the election. And I have to get your take on this, because if Trump is successful, if he is able to get another administration, what do you think this transition team will look like, and what can they get right this time that they didn't last time?
The appointment process is critical. If you think about how an administration goes, you can think of it as in 2 phases. The first phase is the first 100 days. The next phase is thereafter for a year or more. And here's what the difference is. In the first 100 days, you have to rely on people primarily in the White House who do not require Senate confirmation. And you can literally appoint the major people in the White House, the head of the National Economic Council, Domestic Policy Council, National Security Advisor, White House Legal Counsel, Staff Secretary. Those are the five that make it all go. And that's going to be 100 actions in 100 days. That's what you do with executive orders and presidential memos. The problem is that the cabinet, there's 23 cabinet officers, state, defense, commerce, all alike. They have to be confirmed by the Senate, along with their deputies and undersecretaries. That takes at least 100 days to do because of the dysfunction in the U.S. Senate right now. And we've seen that before. And so you're going to see a flurry of executive orders that are going to get written during the transition and signed from day one through the first 100 days if all goes well. And what's going to be critical there is to appoint the right people in those positions. We did not do that, exclamation point, the first time around. Within the White House, you had people like Gary Cohn, H.R. McMaster as the NSA, Don McGahn as the White House legal counsel, Mick Mulvaney was at OMB. All of these people were opposed to the Trump agenda. So it was the force of will of President Trump and a few people like me and Bannon who were able to move things forward. But it was a battle. We do not need that this next time. We will not have that. The president understands what needs to be done. And then over time, as you get your cabinet in place, you begin to make the more profound changes in terms of the regulatory environment that these agencies can do. At energy, it's going to be drill, baby, drill. At Homeland Security, it's going to be securing the border and mass deportations. At Treasury and Commerce, it's going to be the trade and tariff agenda. And there's just a lot of work to do. And I think the thing you have to realize is that time is so precious. There's about a little more than 1,000 days once you get in there to make a difference. And I think there'll be a much greater sense of how important every minute is when you're in there. And I'm not sure we had that the first time around. I know that Donald Trump has it this next time around.
So, Peter, this is music to my ears. I feel now every day like I can't believe this is happening, but we are winning. And what you're saying, just to reiterate here at the end of the show with 30 seconds left, is that this time around, you and others are ready to go in there and do your utmost as a team to support the Trump agenda.
Well, I'm not looking for a job, but I know the president knows what he needs to do and who he needs to appoint, and he needs to get going. If anybody's curious, I do have this new MAGA deal book, newmagadeal.com. It identifies 100 actions in 100 days, which will include everything from the tariffs to getting the men out of women's sports and everything in between, if people want to know that. And going into Election Day, there might be some undecideds who need to find out what that looks like. But I'm off to Pennsylvania in a couple days. We'll finish up there. We did great things there. President Trump saved the Philly yard out in Newcastle. He saved a plant that makes big naval propellers the size of a house. The steel mills were humming under and there's so many reasons in Pennsylvania that he's going to win that battleground state because he helped black, brown, and blue collar workers in that state as he rebuilt our defense industrial base.
Well, Peter,
so,
we really thank you for
what happens.
Yeah, we really thank you for doing that, getting out to Pennsylvania and all of the time that you spent in the Trump administration and here on our show today. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right, you take care of yourself. Thanks again for the article.
Yes. When we come back, Steve Baker will explain what the media isn't telling you about January 6th coming up. Well, you just heard it from Peter Navarro. This election is going to be huge. Election night is going to be great here on Blaze TV because we're going to have boots on the ground all across the country. So what we need you to do, you need to go out and vote. But on election night, come join us because our correspondents are going to be delivering the pulse of the night straight from where things are happening. And all you have to do is subscribe and be a part with us here at Blaze TV because we speak the truth. We're not going to have any spin. There's not going to be any filters. It's just going to be real talk about what's happening on election night. So go to blazeelection.com/BNT and get $40 off. That's it. blazeelection.com/BNT for $40 off. Just how were Capitol Police set up to fail on January 6th? Well, Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker detailed this in his recent piece for theblaze.com, and he joins us now to discuss it. So, Steve, you've done so much work on this. What's the latest findings for you here with this January 6th case?
Well, the latest is actually yet to be revealed. I'll just say that right now. We have more coming. This story that we were working on, though, and that we just published is more of an update for the Blaze media, Blaze News consumers who have not been familiar with what I had been working on for the last 3 years. And what we know beyond any shadow of a doubt as it relates to the potential setup or the fact that there was a massive failure related to the police response that day on January 6th, now almost 4 years ago, first of all begins with, and this is very, very significant, is the massive under deployment of the United States Capitol Police on the day. And this is mind-boggling to the officers themselves because, as they will tell you, and we've interviewed many of them, whistleblowers, we've interviewed those who are still with the Capitol Police, officers who have retired, including command level officers, who told us that on the day that they showed up for work, it was just another day at the office. And that's despite the fact that the Capitol Police leadership, specifically the Assistant Police Chief Yogananda Pittman, had issued and signed off on 6 permits for protest on the Capitol property that day, meaning that on a day like that, according to every officer that we've ever talked to with the Capitol Police, is that meant that it was an all boots on the ground day. But it was during the COVID lockdowns, and they had somewhere between 700 and 800 of their uniformed officers on what they called administrative leave that day. They did not bring them in for this special event, which they could have done. They also did not share with the command level officers the intel that was coming in, not only from the United States Capitol Police intel, but from the FBI, from the New York Police Department, from many other agencies that were telling them that there was something up, that they had chatter, that they had intel, that there was going to be violence that day, that there were going to be attacks on the Capitol, even, now this is most important, even that Congress members themselves were to be targeted that day. This intel was shared with the assistant chief level officers there, and it was not disseminated to the actual frontline officers or the command level officers that would be on the ground that day. So rather than having 2,000 uniformed officers, which they would normally have, at the command of those on the ground that day, they had somewhere in the vicinity of only 200 officers, which was why they had to send up the panic call immediately to the Metropolitan Police to get over there. Thank God they got there when they did. And then in addition to that, obviously, we all know the story about the National Guard being refused, and that began with President Trump's offer, the refusals from the Mayor Bowser, and then, of course, the involvement that happened over at the DOD and their refusal to send over the National Guard after the violence had already begun because they didn't like the optics.
Steve, we've had, of course, the through your efforts and Joe's efforts in writing these stories, the former head of the Capitol Police on the show. And it's remarkable to me, as I think is in this article, that some people on the right even would condemn the Capitol Police and say they were somehow part of this, conspiracy or instigated violence. And it seems as if everything you're talking about, the fact that they were made to sign an NDA, they were set up to fail, they weren't given all this information, and even the life of Harry Dunn, the video that's out now, shows that, well, some of them maybe have been co-opted later on. This is a group of people who didn't initiate anything, and in fact were sacrificial pawns. Is that right?
Yeah, and one of the most egregious narratives that's out there, even from the right, is that the Capitol Police or the Metropolitan Police started the problem. That's not what happened at all. The first two breach lines that happened outside at the Capitol were initiated by violent provocateurs. We are yet to determine who specifically that they were working for. We have our ideas, and we're working on that. So when Jill asked earlier, "What's the latest?" That's coming. But what we know is that these guys were left flat-footed without any information. They didn't have headgear. They didn't have body armor. They didn't have anything that they needed when this massive crowd started moving over, and then the provocateurs breached the first barricade. The second barricade started attacking the third barricade, and then things started happening. And look, let's be honest, there were some illegal uses of what they call less than lethal armaments against the crowd. Absolutely were used outside of their training, in violation of their training, in response to what was happening. There was panic there. I saw the panic with my own eyes. I was there at 1:19 p.m. on the West Front battle line. The first thing I recorded was injuries. I got up in the Capitol Police officers' faces with my camera, and I recorded the panic. And that's when I first began to realize that these guys were caught flat-footed. Now, that doesn't excuse the leadership that withheld this information. That does not in any way exonerate the leadership who not only withheld this intelligence, but did not hold briefings that morning, as we demonstrated in A Day in the Life of Harry Dunn Part 1, that in fact the normal morning roll call briefings that they would have, they didn't even hold them that day. And we have Capitol Police officers even testifying in the various January 6 trials to that effect, that they showed up to work thinking it was just another normal day, and that they were told nothing in briefings because they didn't have briefings that day.
Steve, we have a lot of topics to go through with you. Before we leave January 6th, though, I just want to give you a chance to tell people a little bit about what's in this new video, which is really the meat of the matter for Officer Harry Dunn, who I just saw on TV today. I mean, he's still campaigning for Biden and spreading disinformation about January 6th. But this is the video that we've been waiting for. So tell people what's in it.
Yeah, this is a really important video because this really cuts to the crux of the matter, especially with the Department of Justice involvement in January 6th. And that boils down to that the Department of Justice, we believe, some member, somebody, somewhere, suborned perjury from not only former officer Harry Dunn, but also Capitol Police Special Agent David Lazarus in their testimonies against the Oath Keepers back in the fall of 2022. And that's what this particular episode, or part 2 of our series, focuses on, are the lies that were constructed, how the two officers not only contradicted each other, but actually neither of their testimonies could in fact be true in any way, shape, or form by the video evidence that we were granted access to in the Capitol CCTV viewing room by Congress. And as a result of that, I just don't believe, Matt, that they ever thought, whether it was the Department of Justice, the Capitol Police, and certainly not these two officers, that somebody like myself would ever get access not only to the video itself, because at the time that these lies were told and that the subornation of perjury took place, the left, the Democrats, controlled Congress and certainly would have never granted access to those videos. But more importantly, we were given permission to use videos that were marked highly sensitive down in the bowels, down in the tunnels of the Capitol, which allowed us to absolutely 100% without any shadow of a doubt identify that Special Agent David Lazarus not only lied in his testimony at the Oath Keepers trial, but he was in a place where he could not have seen what he claimed to have seen 3 or 4 times, and when in fact he was in another building across the street.
All right, Steve, I know you spent a lot of time in Western North Carolina, so let's move on to the Hurricane Helene response because we have a former Pentagon official, Casey Wardynski, that has told Blaze News that the federal response to Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina, in Tennessee, in Georgia is pathetic compared to the response in past hurricanes. He also said it was political and it was intended to target the Trump supporter areas. So what is your response when you hear somebody that is a former Pentagon official come out and say these things?
Well, this isn't just some hack former Pentagon official. This is a guy who was 30 years in the Army. The Army sent him while he was still an active duty trooper in the Army. They sent him to get his master's degree at Harvard. He was already a West Point grad. Then they sent him to get his doctorate at Rand. They made him the chief economist of the Pentagon. He's a logistician. After his retirement of 30 years in the Army, he was then later appointed by President Trump in 2019 to be the assistant secretary of the Army over manpower. And he managed an $87 billion budget in that department. And that budget that he managed and that department that he managed was exactly what is not being used in the disaster relief here in North Carolina and the other 6 states that have been affected. As a matter of fact, what we were able to show in this article, as the kids like to say today, we brought the receipts. We were able to show what the federal government, through the request and in partnership with the governors, when they request this aid, were able to supply in places like New Orleans for Katrina, in Houston for their hurricane, in Puerto Rico. And not only that, but all over the world in other disasters, Haiti, their earthquake, in Indonesia from their tsunami. And it massively dwarfs what has been provided here in North Carolina. Literally, the governor of North Carolina last week bragged that they had 3,150 federal boots on the ground, including National Guard units. That's 3,150 when all of these other disasters that I just mentioned range from 15, 17,000, 60,000 federal troops were assisting in those disasters. And we have a paltry 3,000 here. And that's just in North Carolina. But we have 28 counties that have been devastated here in this state. And the geographic size of this disaster dwarfs any of the other ones that I've just mentioned right now. Houston was bad. New Orleans was bad. Obviously, Puerto Rico, Haiti were bad, but the geographic size of this disaster dwarfs those. And because of the complexity and the rugged terrain and the near almost impossibility of getting to people in these mountainous regions, we should have had, and according to former Assistant Secretary of the Army, Casey Wardynski, we had the supplies here. We have the engineering is there. It's in our backyard. It's literally here, not only in North Carolina, but they have engineering brigades in South Carolina, Tennessee, West Virginia that could have had overwhelming support here in North Carolina and had it here immediately, but it's still not here yet. And it's going to be 5 weeks in 2 days. On Thursday, it'll be 5 weeks since this disaster, and they're already pulling some of that 3,150 troops out and sending them home.
It is unreal what they are doing there to the people in Western North Carolina. But Steve, thanks so much for all of the updates and for all of the January 6th updates that you continue to do. Everybody should go out there and make sure that you watch part 2 of A Day in the Life of Harry Dunn. Steve, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Jill. Matt.
When we come back, we'll give you the latest election integrity updates from Nevada and Pennsylvania. Don't go anywhere. We are 1 week away from Election Day, and a crucial swing state court just affirmed a lower court decision that's a little concerning. Mail ballots arriving up to 3 days after the November 5th election can be counted regardless of whether they bear a postmark or not in Nevada. Here to discuss is Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So, Chris, let's get into this. How much of an impact could this decision have on the election in Nevada?
Serious impact in Nevada. There are signs all over the country that desperate activists and politicos are willing to do things that are shady The Democrats fought extremely hard for this. They basically used delay tactics, delay, which is, as most people who have ever had any unfortunate involvement with the American legal system know, these things can stretch on forever. Republicans have been trying to fix this for months and months and months and months. Democrats pushed it back as part of the intentional tactic because they don't want there to be checks and balances on ballots coming up. And because of that, the judge didn't even really decide on the merits, just said, listen, it's too close to the election. The Republicans has got to be so frustrating because they had been really working on this for a while now. And when you see these cases in Pennsylvania, for example, where a poll where somebody was caught dropping off potentially thousands of ballots across 4 different counties, filled out, investigators wonder, by the same person, which would make them fraudulent. When you see election drop boxes getting lit on fire in Antifa areas of the Pacific Northwest, you're starting to see some dangerous signs because, listen, elections don't just need to actually work. They don't just need to be able to count the votes properly. They also, this is really important, need people to believe that that is what they are doing. So it's not enough to be fair. Everything could be above board in Nevada. And it's still, if there are seeds of doubt and people do not think that, then it rots the trust in institutions and can lead to some chaos.
Chris, we've already been through this in a way, right? I mean, we've already been through this in spades. I mean, 2020 was revolved around this question. So when you look out and you see this happening again, do you think we're just going to see a replay of what happened last time across the country in terms of the response and the questions that people are asking?
I think we'll see a replay of the response and the questions. I think we'll get further than previously. I think Republicans have started to wake up to this. I think that the early conspiracy theories about foreign governments controlling different computers, which went too far and turned a lot of people off. Molly Hemingway's book, Rigged, really gave the tools to elected officials, who are obviously extremely cowardly on subject matters like this, to be able to talk about the problems, the systemic problems, the COVID measures that were put in, actually expose some of these tactics that are used by unscrupulous activists who would prefer to see Democrats in office. I was at that time reporting at the Federalist, and I thought I was going to be able to relax after that election. I ended up in Philadelphia, where I kind of struck gold in that the guys who used to run the Philadelphia Democratic machine, the union guys, the organized crime guys, they've been pushed out by woke politicians elected by woke liberals since Philadelphia had become so gentrified in certain areas. And they no longer had the access to the powers. They were willing to talk about the different methods that they used, the different judges that they used, not to wholesale cheat, but to tinker around the edges, to be kind of scammy, to be act suspiciously. They were willing to talk about that sort of thing. Now Republicans are willing to talk about it. These lawsuits are only happening because Republicans are taking it seriously. I do not think that Democrats will be as successful at this enough to actually chip the election. I think that the incredibly depressed turnout, the terrible campaign that President Trump ran in 2020, the optimism and the hope that something could actually be different amongst Democrats, that Joe Biden might actually be someone who healed us as opposed to divided us, the state of the economy, all those things played in where by a pretty small margin, Democrats were actually able to take that vote. They don't have that advantage this time. So I am still cautiously optimistic that Republicans will win. And from that position, they have to take it seriously. They have to actually look at what's going on in Pennsylvania. They have to look at what's going on in Nevada. They have to figure out why counties like Maricopa claim it could take them days and days to count ballots. No, you have to figure this out right now. And once Republicans start to really take it seriously, hopefully this will be something in our past.
Well, I think Hillary Clinton is actually agreeing with you because she had election night fireworks planned over the Hudson River, Chris. That is not her plan anymore. That's been canceled, according to a law enforcement official. So what does that tell you about what the Clintons at least think is going to happen on election night?
Well, the Clintons are going to be holding their nose, and you saw from Bill Clinton the way he was talking about it earlier. They certainly don't seem too impressed with Kamala. I think Hillary Clinton is someone who's probably a little annoyed that she is not going to be the first female president, extremely annoyed. And I think she'd even be annoyed if Kamala was the first female president at this point. Yeah, those elections, that's a story that's resurfaced lately, because Hillary Clinton, when she was running, had a big party planned. She booked the Javits Center, which has history with Donald Trump, because he'd worked really hard to develop that land, and he'd been kind of screwed over by the mayor of New York. It had been given to someone else who built the Javits Center. He lost a lot of money. He wrote about it in the Art of the Deal, how ticked off he was about it. She chose that to do her campaign celebration when she was going to be Madam President. She booked all these fireworks for the Monday before, for Tuesday, election night, to be prepared. They had a big glass ceiling in the Javits Center. People knew for weeks and weeks that this is what she was going to do. People were lined up for miles that night. I was down there. And then the night before what was supposed to be her coronation, Queen Hillary, she canceled those fireworks. And that is almost certainly the internal polling that Democrats were getting. They were preparing potentially for disaster. And right now you see that kind of reflected in Kamala Harris. They literally had an off-the-record conversation with reporters today about logistics for where the celebration was. Don't worry, I wasn't on the call, so I can repeat it. And they didn't include where the celebration is going to be. They're being really tight-lipped about it. There are rumors, and we're going to be investigating those rumors. But for now, they want to avoid the embarrassment Hillary Clinton went through.
They might want to tie down all the lamps as well there, Peterson.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. I think
no lamp was safe.
I think that we have an enormous problem here where good Democratic oligarchs can't even plan a decent party. This is really becoming an issue. We've really reached an interesting point in our coverage. I think we should talk about something else, though. How about this one, Chris? We have an archbishop in Puerto Rico asking Trump to apologize or disavow what a comedian said about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. In the midst of a joke, Puerto Rico, growing up with some of my relatives from New York City, I thought people of all kinds in America sort of made New Jersey-esque jokes sometimes about Puerto Rico, including Puerto Ricans themselves. But this is sort of interesting. I mean, the Archbishop seems up in arms. What do you make of this?
It ticks me off to absolutely no end. It's so perfect. It's a perfect encapsulation of the Catholic Church, which you and I both belong to, Matt, and love, but the incredible bureaucratic cowardice of the bishops. But we are right now in an election with like an openly anti-Catholic candidate in Kamala Harris, much more so than previous candidates. Someone who's literally tried to bar Catholics and members of the Knights of Columbus from judgeships in the United States because she doesn't like the religion. She wants to force Catholic hospitals to provide abortion. She wants to force Catholic insurance companies to pay for it. She wants to follow the model the Democrats have used in Massachusetts and other places to shut down Catholic orphanages if they follow their belief on marriage and what they think is a healthy home for children. She parties with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which are an absolutely ghoulish and satanic group of anti-Catholic people. So the bishops speak out about that? No, because of course the realm of spiritual warfare they consider not something the church should be talking about in public. Instead, what they decide to talk about is Donald Trump. I have not. There's been the United States Conference of Bishops has been pretty quiet this election. They haven't talked about religious liberty like I think they really ought to be, but they at least haven't gone after Trump the way that they have previously. There's been a hardworking, behind-the-scenes campaign by prominent Catholics in America to tell them, "Hey, be quiet. If you got nothing nice to say nothing at all." I guess that memo may not have been received down in San Juan. But for this to be the first measure that a bishop feels like they should use their pulpit to demand, I'm fine with bishops making demands of politicians. I think they should make a lot more. They're fellow princes on this earth. They should treat them as equals, not as their leaders. But for this to be the moment when you call it out, and by the way, Donald Trump didn't say anything about Puerto Rico. Bishops you should have a better understanding of sin and wrong than to demand a personal apology from Donald Trump for this. So, it's another day. It's another problem. Fortunately, because of the incredible mismanagement of Catholic hierarchy over the last 40 years in American life, no more liberals are joining the church. All the new priests are conservative. So in 20 years' time, everyone's happily retired. I think might see a different kind of reaction politically from bishops.
That is very well said, Chris. Now, what can I look forward to as I wake up to the Beltway brief in my inbox tomorrow morning?
I can't wait. I just finished it. I'm looking through. I think there's been a little bit of the willies that have entered some Republicans because things were going so well. And then someone who a lot of us have not actually heard of because we're not online enough made a joke. And now, oh, the sky is falling. The Archbishop's condemning people. But I've got a good point, I think, that would set that straight. And where Republicans want to be talking this final week, where Democrats are, and which of those just might be running the stupidest campaign in my living life.
Wow. That is a great tease, Chris. I look forward to that, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
I'll see you then.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up the show. Stay with us. Well, it's 7 days till the election. I don't know if these 7 days, Matthew, are going to go fast or really, really slow. And I know that we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we were talking with Peter Navarro about a second possible Trump administration. And you know all about this, and you've seen these people. You know a lot of these, the guys that are going to be taking over if Trump does, in fact, win. So what are you looking forward to here?
Well, I mean, but from what I do know, it looks really, really good. And so cautious optimism is very much, I mean, we're talking about, people seriously talking about appointments that I can't talk about, but that you wouldn't believe. Appointments that you wouldn't believe. The best people, all the best people for real this time. And you could see what Peter talked about during the show. I mean, no, we learned our lessons. We can't have that again. This is going to be a Trumpian agenda, and we're going to go after the deep state for real. So, I think no matter how you slice it, if Trump wins, you are going to see an incredibly different, more boisterous, and more belligerent crew come in with him to enact his agenda.
And if Trump wins, all of the problems that we talk about with Steve Baker and January 6th could go away because you're not going to have the same people in the federal government attacking these people and continuing to arrest them in larger numbers this year.
Oh, yeah. The kind of work that Steve is doing, that we're doing here at Blaze, will be rewarded, right, in this administration because government officials will actually hold people accountable. And our job is to hold them accountable now and then make that information public. And so what Steve has done, if there's a Republican, revitalized takeover, they're going to take this information and hold people accountable at DOJ because of what we're doing here every day.
And again, we don't want to get excited, but I mean, Hillary Clinton is canceling fireworks. I love that Bedford came with that info.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't want to anger Hillary too much. We all like living. But I do think that, the fact that she's canceling the fireworks is indicative of where we're at. Cautious optimism is warranted, but no one should get complacent right now. No one should be cocky. No one should be oversure. This is not a sure thing. Everyone needs to go out and vote.
We're all happy to be alive. We like our lives. We like where we are right now. We are 7 days away from one of the biggest elections of our lifetime. And be sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll be back to break it all down tomorrow night.